In this video I'm going to show you how to create the curly cord that attaches to the hairdryer. So for this we're going to introduce 3D sketches and sweeping a profile along a 3D sketch. So we're going to do this from within the assembly, and the reason for that is that we want to have the curly cord that's the right shape to sit appropriately within the assembly. First we need to create a new component. So insert component, new part, and it wants to have a plane to start sketching on, so we're going to create that on the right plane. It doesn't matter because we're going to exit that sketch and we're going to create a 3D sketch to start off with. Now a 3D sketch, as the name suggests, allows you to create a sketch in 3 dimensions. To start off with, we're going to use this to create the outline of where the curly cord needs to go, and I'm going to start off with the spline, and in fact the whole thing will be created through splines. So the approximate outline that the curly cord goes in is going to be like this. Now, as soon as you start creating a sketch, you have this option. You have this little triad here. You can see 2 red lines and a black line. The 2 red lines are the plane that we're currently sketching on. If we want to sketch in a different plane, we can then hit Tab, and you see the red line just changes, and then the plane that we're actually sketching on changes again, and we can toggle through the 3 options. So in this case we've got the ZX plane, this is in the XY plane, and this is in the YZ plane. So we want to start sketching in the XY plane. We're just going to create a very simple curve like that. To make the curly cord, we're going to use a fairly complex process of sweeping a surface along a profile. The reason why we use a surface sweep is because we can control the rotation of that surface sweep. So to make the surface sweep we need 2 things. We need a profile and we need a line which will form the surface. So in order to get a line, the line that we create needs to be perpendicular to the end of this line. So let me show you how to make a plane perpendicular on the end of the line. We go Insert, Reference Geometry, Plane. Now we can select the end of that line and it will just create a plane on that line. But if we select a second reference point, the line itself, what it will do is create a plane which is perpendicular to the end of that line, and that's exactly what we want. Now using that plane we're going to keep this curve simple. Don't try to put too many points in there, and don't try and get anything that's too any sharp corners, because what will happen as the curly cable is created, it will intersect with itself and it won't work. The next step is a little bit complicated. So once we've created that sketch, this sketch will put our curly cord approximately in the right spot. Now the reason why we're going to use a surface sweep is because we can control the rotation of that surface sweep, and then that will allow us to create another 3D sketch. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But in order to make a surface we need to have another profile to sweep along this spline. So to do that we need a plane perpendicular to the end of this line, and I'll show you how to do that. Insert Reference Geometry, Plane, and we select the end of that line, and the second reference point is the line itself. So if we just select the end of the line, it doesn't really know where to put the plane. If we select the line, what it will do is the only option with a point and a line is to make the plane perpendicular to the end of that line. This is exactly what we want. And on that plane we're going to create a sketch, and we're going to put a simple line coming out of that sketch. Put a dimension on that line. You can adjust this later, but we probably want to be about 6 millimeters. So now we can go to Insert Surface, Sweep, and we can select the profile Now normally that's a closed profile with sweeping a solid, but it can be an open profile with a surface. And then we select the path, and that's what it would look like if we just hit OK. But there are lots of options with surface sweep. What we can do is to we can have the profile orientation, we can have twist. So in this case we want to use the twist, and we want to specify the twist value. And twist control, we can either work out how many degrees it's going to twist, or we can have the number of revolutions. So we'll select number of revolutions, and in this case you can see as you increase the revolutions, we increase the curliness of that chord. So this will take a little bit of trial and error to get right, but I'm going to start off with about 40. So now we have a surface that's spiraled like that. What we'll need to do though is to turn this into a 3D sketch. So the way we can do that is to create a 3D sketch, and then we can use the edge of that plane. We can select the edge of the plane and go convert entities, and what we have is a nicely curled coil. I'll just hide the surface sweep now, which we don't need anymore. Don't suppress it, just hide it, and that's the profile that we're going to sweep our cable along. Well, at least it will once we've finished it. What we need to do is to add a couple of sections on the end, on this end where it goes into the plug, and on this end where it attaches to the hairdryer. So using 3D Sketch, we're going to use a spline, and we're going to start off probably better if we start off in the Y-X axis. We'll create a bit of a spline profile. Then we can change by hitting the tab key to a YZ profile. Then we can hit the tab key and do an XY profile. Now we're going to stop on here, and as you can see, as I bring my cursor to the center of that oval, there's a center point and it just snaps to that. And then I'm just going to put a straight line on the end of this. I'm going to select that line, select this line, and make them tangent. I'm also going to select this curly line and the new spline that I've created and make that tangent as well. So now we have a bit of a wobbly line, but we can adjust that later. We can then also adjust this around so that that bit of the cable goes straight into the hairdryer handle. And again, we can just adjust that and tweak that until we get it right. But that will do for now. So this profile probably is a bit too complex. Probably just minimize that. Maybe even remove a couple of those points. Anyway, we can play around with that later. So that's one end, and the other end can just be again a simple line that will attach to our plug. Oops. Do that again. And we'll make those two lines tangent to each other, so we've got a nice smooth curve. The next step is to create a profile that we can sweep along this path. The profile needs to be on a plane that is perpendicular to the start of the path. To create a plane on the end of a curve, we need to select the end point of that curve. We need to go insert reference geometry plane, and we also need to select the profile. Once we've got that, we can then very simply create a sketch on that new plane, whatever shape we want. For this case, just a simple circle. Put a dimension on the circle, 4 millimeters. And that's the profile that we're going to sweep along that path. Very simply, we go to Insert Boss Base Sweep, select that profile. So we've got a couple of options here, and that's the path that we want to sweep it along, and that's what it's going to look like. So there we have the curly cord. The only other thing we need to do is to create the plug that goes on the end, and that is relatively simple because we can sketch on the end of this plane here, create a sketch, and we're just going to make a circle on the end of that. We're going to make the plug out of a loft, and that's the first sketch, and we're just going to do offset entities, make that a little bit bigger, let's say 3 millimeters bigger than the end of the cable. Now we're going to create an offset plane to create the other end of the plug. So go insert reference geometry plane, and we're just going to go offset by 40 millimeters. And that's the plane. So on that plane we're going to create an ellipse, and I'll just roughly sketch something and then define it by dimensions. The center of the ellipse and the center of the circle need to be concentric, so just move that across. I'll put some dimensions on the ellipse. That's going to be about 20 millimeters, and the larger dimension is going to be about 30. So to create the loft, we go Insert Boss Loft, select this profile, select that profile. Now what that will do is create a cone shape. We actually don't want that. We want a more of an organic shape, and what we can do is change the start and end profiles. If we change that to normal to profile, and then the end one to normal to profile as well, we have a shape that's a little bit like that. Okay, I think that plug's probably a little bit long, so I'm just going to change the offset of that plane. So instead of 40, I'm going to make that 30. And that's looking a little bit more like a plug. Only other thing we need to do is to create the tabs that make the... I'll put a center line in here and that horizontal, then we can just mirror that tab to the other side and extrude. Again, you can play around with that to get them more accurate, but that's approximately it. Now you'll probably find that the cable isn't really looking very realistic. It's not where you want it to be, but this is where it's very easy to go back to original sketches and modify them and change them to get them into the right spot. So I'll just go and edit that the original 3D sketch. So you'll see if you select any one of these points, you've got X, Y, and Z coordinates, and you can move them in any direction. You can drag and drop, or you can just move it using these coordinates. Let's say we want to drop that down a little bit. We can do that, and then when it updates, you can see we've got a little bit more three-dimensionality in our cable. So we can go back, if we edit these